Captioning, the closed captioning, closed captioning. It's working good. It's great. It's definitely working. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Okay. All right, we're gonna call this meeting to order. This is the August 24th, 2022 meeting of the Tech Committee. So we have a couple of things on the agenda. We're going to talk about paperless Hudson. We're going to go over some website updates and hopefully talk a little bit more about the two parties that we've entertained, GoGov or C-Click-Fix. And then Councilmember Wallace, if you give us a brief update on where we're at the Treasurer's Office in Springbrook regarding all of the civic pay stuff. I think that should take care of it for this country. So I'm assuming that you're here, Crystal, to talk about policy stuff. Code update.
Yes, sorry, I've got a new computer and I'm trying to figure out how to hear everybody. Can you hear me okay?
You can hear you great.
Okay. I had sent around 2 local laws dealing with the notice of elections and also the notice of special meetings. And I had considered incorporating into that a local law to deal with electronic records policy, but honestly, it seemed like overkill. It's not needed to do that. So that's where I thought if the committee's interested in going down this route, then I would amend the charter, those 2 sections or 3 sections of the charter that I had circulated the local laws on, and then also have the council consider a policy which speaks to opting in for council members. And then if you want to go a step further on that, there's the resolution that has to be adopted unanimously by the council if the council would want to allow for electronic delivery of local laws to be introduced instead of having to go through that very formal process of doing it at the meetings, or technically providing it to the desks of the council members.
So my only question on that latter one is, what does it do for the sort of like public element of that? I mean, will it just mean that we need to start posting them on the city's homepage then, right? In terms of making it accessible to the public. So if it gets introduced by, say, Ronnie, right, he sends it to all of us at the same time. Are we making the request then for Michael Hoffman to post it to the city website just so that folks know for 30 days, this is something that the council's looking at?
I would do it simultaneously for transparency reasons. Really, what the purpose of it will be, or the practical implications of it, is that it's going to reduce the time frame between when you receive it and when you can actually act on it. Because it doesn't necessarily have to be, if everyone's receiving this local law, it's being introduced at a meeting. It doesn't have to be introduced at a meeting. It can simply be introduced. And it doesn't have to be introduced now, technically, at a meeting. It really just it's introduced when it's delivered to the council members. So it just changes that mechanism.
Okay. Margaret?
Yeah, go for it, Margaret.
Hi, Crystal. I'm joining this evening because there's an overlap between the legal committee and this committee. Like 4 members of the legal committee are on this committee, and so it didn't make sense to go through the same stuff twice. In what you've just described, I'm not quite clear on that mechanism. So can you go through that again?
Sure. So for local laws, if you're going to have a local law introduced, it has to technically be delivered to your council members, and it cannot be done via electronic delivery. That is under the municipal home rule law. The only way you can do it via electronic delivery, as opposed to, doing it the way it is handled now, which is a paper law that's being provided at a meeting, it's being introduced, it's being seconded, and then it's starting the clock for the days in which it can be acted on. The only way you can use electronic delivery to facilitate that is if there is a resolution that is adopted unanimously by the Common Council that essentially says we are going to allow for local laws to be introduced by receiving them via email. And what that does is that clock, that window of time, that there's that waiting period before the council can act, it's going to start when it's actually delivered electronically via email to the council members, as opposed to that introduction at the meeting.
So this would potentially occur a week before a meeting or some run up to a meeting. A law would be emailed to us. And then it's essentially on our electronic desks. And then, as Ryan said, we would also have it posted to the city website at the same time. So at the moment, when a local law is introduced and set on our desks, it's presented and seconded. So in the email process, would it have to go through some similar process where two people are submitting it, or could I just off the bat decide, oh, here's something I'm going to send to the council?
So it's been my understanding, it's been the city's practice to go through that formal introduction process, but that formal introduction process is actually not required by law.
Correct.
So that, and I'm sure that there is a historic reason for why the city has been doing it that way. So you don't have to go through that formal first and second for the introduction for the local laws.
Okay.
Does the amendment, if we were to adopt unanimously the electronic receipt of local laws, does it have to be delivered through email, or can it be through another platform? Because we are also talking about some other document management software like DocuSign potentially, which I have some follow-up questions about.
I think it's just electronic means.
By electronic means, it doesn't say like email specifically.
So that's actually an interesting question, because the statute speaks very specifically to publication via email.
Right.
I would have to look into it a little bit further to see if there's, other types of platforms that might be available, but the statute is specific to emails.
Sorry.
Yeah, so, and if I know that we're just talking about, if you have some more questions with the local laws, I was gonna kind of move into some e-signature stuff.
Local. I got
Yeah.
local law questions, because I think Margaret's probably still on local law.
Yeah.
The, Crystal, is there a way that we could say that even if it's delivered via email, the clock doesn't tick until it's presented in the public meeting?
Oh, sure. You can still do that at the agenda reviews. There's no reason for that. It's just a matter of that clock for the action time is going to change.
I worry about a local law being sent to members of the council and accidentally not being included. You know what I mean? Like, how do you directly send the members of the public the same, how do you extend the same kind of courtesy for transparency's sake? But I feel like if we were to say, well, you're going to get a local law in your email, but, we're not going to really act or talk about it until, Tom makes us, right? In a meeting.
And again, this is not something that you have to do. It's just, since you were discussing, paperless options, I thought it prudent to bring this statute and the language in the statute to your attention. But you don't have to do this at all. You can go forward with paperless Hudson and allow for electronic delivery of official documents, but not include the local laws with it.
Yeah, I think it would be prudent to include it, just being future-proof. It is a big portion of how we print documents, so I think it's a good idea to include it.
Second, Agreed. Margaret, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think, Art, to your point, starting the clock when it's received, whether that's on a, we have a virtual desk that we receive things on, or email. Virtual desk, I kind of like the idea of. We could have in the next meeting just an agenda item acknowledging that on such
On
a date, the following local laws were presented to our virtual desk. So the clock has started, and then we acknowledge it, so nothing gets lost in the shuffle. We just have a list of things that were placed in on our electronic desks. I think that would address what I think you're talking about.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're, not circumventing some public,
Right.
standard that we've enacted as a city. Dominic, you have your hand up.
Thanks, and I apologize. I jumped in late if this question was answered. Is there going to be an option, though, in terms of a choice, in terms of the council member, if they choose not to have electronic delivered, if it's, somebody don't have email, or, web service or whatever, is there going to be an out for a council member to ask, or to, by writing or something, to have it ultimately delivered?
I appreciate you already thinking about your next role in government, Dominic, but I think that I'm under the impression, and Crystal will keep me honest, but that these would all be this would be technically an opt-in. So I, as Councilmember Brick, would opt in to electronic delivery of, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, all of these documents. And then that would be basically in effect for each council member. So, if Ryan says, hey, you know what, I look at screens all day and I really just want to see printed things, he can have that option. Right, or whatever.
Okay, great. Just like we did earlier on, we chose for our calendar to be, delivered electronically. I got you.
Correct. Thank you. Margaret, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I see a problem with that with regard to the local law situation, because what Crystal said at the outset, specific to the local laws, was it would have to be unanimous decision by all council members to allow for this delivery of local law electronically, and particularly if we're starting the clock. If we do it, because we'd also have this opportunity of starting the clock. If we're going to start the clock from when we receive it, then everybody has to receive it at the same time. And so it kind of defeats the purpose if we're going to say, well, it's opt-in, and therefore some people are not going to get it until the meeting. So therefore we can't really start the clock until the meeting. So as it is in the meetings, you can receive things, it gets posted and you don't have to get a paper copy. That's fine. So that serves the paperless Hudson piece. But I think what Crystal is bringing up is a new process that changes how the clock starts, which pretty much means we all have to receive it at the same time. Am I right, Crystal?
Yeah, and actually to Margaret's point, I would say that if you're going to do electronic service of local laws and you have a council member that does not want electronic delivery of local laws, then you would have to provide a hard copy delivery on the same day that you're providing the electronic delivery.
Exactly.
I would make sure you'd want to keep the date, the time the same.
Correct, and that's something we coordinate with the clerk's office.
Exactly.
Yep.
Tom, do you see that as a catastrophe?
No.
No, just.
Oh.
Well, the post office, I don't see how the post office gets involved. You just.
No, I said the clerk's office, not the post office.
The what office?
Clerk.
Clerk's office.
Yeah.
No, you just make the electronic delivery the same day as the meeting where it would be handed out.
Right, but we're saying for whomever would want the hard copy.
Oh, yeah, Tracy would have to.
Yeah,
right.
we'll just say, hey, print it and please put it in their inbox. That's all.
Correct.
I think just wanted to clarify something with Margaret. The unanimous consent was to adopt the law. It doesn't necessarily mean that everybody on the council has to opt in for the e-signatures.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Crystal, but it's this specific line item, right? It's this specific receipt, like basically in the entire paperless Hudson, it's a collection of various amendments and revisions. So each one, I would assume, would need to have its own yay or nays, generally, right, Crystal?
I'm not sure what you mean by, well, so I'm going to say that local laws, yes, that's a separate beast. It's going to be handled in a very specific way, but I'm not sure what you mean by everything else being different yay or nays.
The collection of charter amendments, like there's like 4 or 5 different revisions.
So my thought was that if the council was going to go ahead and have, say, an electronic delivery policy or electronic service policy, if you've got a council member that is opting in, that opt-in would be good for anything that would allow for electronic service. Because otherwise it would get very confusing for your clerk and for your department heads if they have to go and check to see if they're opting in on this, but they're not opting in on that.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Well, Margaret, what's up?
Yeah, so so I come back to what Tom said. The only advantage that I see to the electronic delivery, the process that Crystal laid out, is that it enables us to change when the clock starts. At the moment, when we have something put on our desks at meeting, everything has been posted in our document folder, and by virtue of the fact that it's posted, those of us who want to just, not receive hard copy, don't receive hard copy, we download it or we review it. So we're already paperless. So if we're going to say if we're going to do electronic delivery of local laws, we deliver them on the day of the meeting, we don't need this at all because we already have electronic delivery of local laws at the meeting. We just have a process where we say, we acknowledge in this meeting that this law has been presented. So this only has an advantage if it means that outside of the meeting thing, we're not stuck with being tied to a meeting date. We can have local laws presented, start the clock, and then acknowledge in the next meeting, by the way, here's the list of things that were presented. And we're already 15 days into the clock, say. And that to me is the advantage of it. I think it's unnecessary if we're going to link the electronic presentation of the law to the date of the meeting, because we don't need that. We're already paperless on that.
Except maybe that's the reasoning behind the introduction, the second, to make that the formal start clock.
That is my understanding of the reasoning, Tom. But
Right.
I understood what Crystal was saying to be that this would mean you could start the clock ahead of the meeting.
Right, but why would we want to do that?
But all I'm saying is the only reason to do this is if there is some advantage to starting the clock at a different time. If it's always going to be at the meeting, then we don't need any of this. We already have everything posted in our document folders. We already have a mechanism to go paperless on all of this stuff.
Right.
So, if we're going to say we would do it on the meeting date, then we don't need this change in policy or anything else. We just leave everything as it is right now.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, I'm inclined to keep it. I don't think that I don't think that the juice is worth the squeeze on this one, especially if we're going to just tie the delivery dates together. So what was that, Margaret?
I agree.
Does anybody disagree?
So we're, just to be clear, what juice, sorry, so we're not, yeah, I know, okay.
Just this portion where.
Just this portion
Email
where-
portion.
Right, because, so we're saying, don't email it because it's already posted.
No, I think Margaret and Arta saying that there's no point of changing this law because the clock is,
It's already started, yeah.
we're not trying to move the clock anyways, because if we have
Right.
a coordination effort that needs to happen, it's just not worth the effort to do all of it.
Right, but in the current language, as is, Crystal addresses like the posting on, like, we don't need to change that to address whether it's email or anything like that. The language of the law already accommodates that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, technically, the way the statutes are written is that local laws are envisioned to be printed out and presented.
Yeah,
But the city of Hudson does have, its own unique practice where it goes through in its agenda review and does a formal introduction and second. So I could see where that's not really pertinent to how the city of Hudson practices, because in other municipalities, there's not that agenda review that happens the week before. So in those situations, those local laws really do have to be printed out and presented to the council. And this mechanism under the municipal home rule law allows for an alternative to that for electronic delivery. But because of how the city of Hudson works and how you handle your agenda meetings, it really may not be needed at all.
okay, yeah, okay, well, I mean, I guess my question, if we're kind of wrapping up this local law right here, if there was another effort in like the late spring, early summer to conversation around like electronic signatures. And I'm wondering if, I'm happy to just to have this be its own agenda item in next month's technology meeting, if it can feel this is too separate, but I wonder, is this conversation tied at all to the Electronic Signature and Records Act? Like, and is it worthwhile to like pass this if we are potentially moving towards an electronic signature platform? Or are they just two separate things in your mind totally?
So with the Electronic Records Act, that's also where you're going to want to have a policy in place as well. So
Right.
all of that, if you're going to start talking about electronic signatures and implementing that with how the city operates, you're going to want to have a policy in place, and you're supposed to have a policy in place under the act that speaks to how all of that's being handled and to make sure that those documents are authentic. Because that's another issue too. You're going to have a situation where there could be lawsuits, there could be evidentiary issues, and you want to make sure that you can properly authenticate digital signatures.
Right. Okay, yeah, and that, I think, I presented two options for some e-sig platforms back in a couple months ago that specifically address that authentication. There's services that they provide that authenticate, but yeah, I guess maybe we can just offline and just I can email you some of my thoughts about it and I can be more prepared. Like I didn't know if it was worth tying this into this delivery of local laws. It's something that we're going to be already addressing, but I was just like skimming through the municipal law and it seemed like we're already covered with electronic signature. Anyways, I'll just offline with you and would love to like see some sample language and we can hopefully draft something that covers us for the signatures, maybe by next informal or informal after that. But, okay.
Okay.
Was there, going back to just the paperless in general, Crystal, was there, of the 5 charter amendments that seem to have been surfaced, was there any specific concern you had around any of those?
Yes. So that was one of the things that I put in my email was that,
I don't feel like I got this email.
I'm sorry?
I don't feel like I got this email.
Where she wrote about the general municipal law.
Oh, you know what? I totally had you off this email. I'm very sorry about that.
Maybe that's why I don't know what the hell we're talking about. Okay,
That,
cool.
that would explain a lot. I will forward this over to you. I'm sorry. So yeah, when there are the additional sections that were being looked at were 5-4, which requires personal service of notifications of a resolution that's requiring a city officer to file a bond. And essentially what that charter provision is doing, it's essentially like a due process provision, okay? It's giving notice to an officer that if they do not comply, then they can be removed from office. And that is not something I would necessarily recommend be handled in any way other than personal service. So that was one of the charter provisions. The second charter provision, which was not included in the local laws that I put together, was 7-5. And this was just for practical reasons, and we can certainly add it in, but technically it requires personal service on an individual by the city clerk, notifying them that they have been elected or appointed to office. So if there's going to be an opt-in policy, that would typically apply to individuals that are already officers or employees of the city. So it's just, it may not actually come, electronic service may not come into play in that situation.
I think that's fair. I mean, that's like 4 pieces, like what, 12 pieces of mail, that's fine.
And then the last one was the code section 45-9, which is requiring written consent of a department head regarding the destruction of records. And that provision actually does not speak at all as to how that written consent needs to be delivered. And really what you need to be concerned about when you're talking about electronic service versus a hard copy is if there is a provision that specifies how it's going to be delivered. Because 45-9 does not, then you can go ahead and deliver via electronic service anyway. There's nothing that's prohibiting anyone from doing that. So essentially an email consenting would be fine.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm going to forward you this email right now too. So the other code sections that were talked about dealt with the notice of elections and essentially notices with special meetings. Those are the ones that I put together the local laws for that talked about, and Margaret, I did see your note on the election one. You're right. I needed to change the language so it would mirror the notice of special meetings. But essentially where it says that if a council member opts in, then service can be provided electronically as opposed to with personal delivery.
Thanks, Crystal. That was the only comment I was going to make. I took my hand down.
I will review these docs soon. Margaret, did you have anything outside of that?
No, that was the only thing. I was just going to mention that to Crystal, and she already covered it.
Cool. And are there any what am I trying to think of here? So we want to incorporate this process, this opt-in process. Tom, do you have any suggestions on what that would look like?
What do you mean?
Well, we need to create some type of formal mechanism in which council members would be able to opt into electronicness.
Why can't you just send a group thread and then it's on the record?
Well, I tried a group thread, no response, so.
I couldn't hear that.
I was just saying if it was like a group thread, where you're opting into something, and then if you respond, that ideally people respond, and then it's on the record, right?
Well, it's all going to be handled by Tracy, so it's really just a question of her knowing who's in and who's out.
Could it be, sorry, make a suggestion. Could it just happen at the organizational meeting in January?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, I mean, we established
Because
it.
at the organizational meeting, we could also,
Sure.
who needs a device, blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
So what I suspect, so I'll take a peek at these laws, but I would really like to get this in front of everybody on the informal for chatting. Margaret?
Just one comment on the organizational meeting suggestion. The thing about opt-in is that you have to allow people to change their minds. So if somebody decides mid-year or midterm that they want to opt in, they should be able to opt in. If they decide, no, this isn't working for me, I want to opt out, they need to be able to go back to not being in. So it can't be something that you just do once and you're locked into it for your term.
Well, and we can also just specify that if you want to, like, it's opt in or opt out at any time, like. I don't.
You know, Tom is right. If Tracy is handling this, we just notify her as to what our status is, and it's very simple. I don't think we need a big procedure around it. It's pretty straightforward.
Fair
And
enough.
that's, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
And that's exactly how I would recommend handling it, is have it run through the city clerk's office, have, whatever email address that you want these to go to be on file with the city clerk's office. And that's how you would handle the opt-in and make sure that it's or opt out.
I think the email address is simple because we all have cityofhudson.org, so that's not even a problem, really.
Cool. Is there anything special other than I need to coordinate with Tracy, who's like ordering equipment? Tom, I don't know what that process is. I can ask you offline. Member of the public, Ronald.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. What I wanted to ask, first of all, is if electronic notification were universally adopted by every member of the council, the public would then find out about laws being laid on your desks by going to the city website, right?
Yep.
As opposed to finding out about it at a meeting.
You already can do that.
I'm sorry.
What we just decided was to not include that provision of asynchronous distribution of laws. So basically the local law laying on our desks and all of that stuff would remain as it is today.
Okay, and then second, when Ms. Peck referred to a gender review, were you referring to what is discussed at the informal meeting, resolutions and proposals that are discussed at the informal meeting the week before the regular meeting?
I'm sorry. I just think of that as a gender review, but yes, that's
okay.
Exactly
No, but because nowadays, not every item on the agenda at the regular meeting is discussed at the informal meeting. So the
That's
review
true.
in that sense, the review is not complete. That happens at the informal.
That's always been the case, Ron.
Well, I'm sorry, not necessarily.
Yeah, necessarily.
As far as I know.
Okay. Thank
You haven't been here that long, so.
Well, forgive me. I was addressing myself to Ms. Peck.
Ooh. Ooh. And she doesn't know the history either.
All right, this isn't going anywhere productive.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving along. Thank you, Ronald. So I think that takes care of everything else. There was a note from Tracy that I got, Crystal, regarding the records management policy update. Just that there was something, it wasn't disposal of records. I'll talk to her about it. All right. I think that anything else, Councilmember Morris, do you have anything else from the legal end?
No, I think of the things you were discussing tonight, we've talked about everything that the overlap of 5 of us from legal need to talk about. And since I have trouble even logging into a Zoom meeting, I doubt that I can shed any light on the rest of your meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Morris. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, website updates, Mayor Lake Hoffman. What up?
So the redesign process has begun. The designer that's been assigned to our website produced a first draft to me. I'm doing an initial review of that redesign and providing my comments, and then I'll send the second draft around to this committee so that you can take a look at it. I felt just to move things a little bit forward, it would just be easier if I did a first pass and have you all get a second pass. I think it's looking great. After your recommendations, then we'll get the final draft, and at that point they will want to move forward into creating the wireframe so that we have something to interact with and test out. So I think it's looking really good. It's using a very similar color scheme to what we have right now, but introducing a little bit more earthy tones. And it definitely, the layout is far better and will enable us to include the forthcoming video tours as part of the splash that you get right when you log onto the website. So I think it'll look nice and clean and modern and updated. So yeah, more on that soon. I know I also need to schedule time with the designers to talk about specifically integrations with the other technology and software that we're looking into now. I haven't gotten a date yet on that, but I'll be in communication.
Awesome, thank you, Mr. Hoffman. We seem to be, as a tech committee, entertaining two different vendors here, GoGov and SeeClickFix. It's my understanding that some of us are in the GoGov camp and others are in the SeeClickFix camp. And I want us to bury the hatchet in terms of aligning on a provider here, because I feel like really entertaining next steps with the singular provider is probably the next thing to do here. Thoughts?
Do the two camps want to make their case?
Okay, so for public awareness, I believe it's Councilmember Wallace is in the GoGov camp and Councilmember Anthony is in the SeeClickFix camp. And both, I'm sure, have very, very passionate desires for both of their causes. So I would love to use this audience to hear about them.
You want me to go first?
Theo's pulling up his tomb of knowledge.
If you're ready to go, I think, yeah.
He's ready to defeat your argument. So.
No, the only key arguments that I've got for this are integration and payments. So I know for a fact that number one, not only does what GoGov offer integrate with existing services like the parking elements that we have, but in the time that I've spent with Heather and looking at all of the updates that would need to be done for tax collection, utility payment, and more, the civic pay capabilities that GoGov brings to the table all integrate with those with no fee on top. So the challenge that you have to watch out for when you're working with the mobile app integrators is that they're going to put a service fee across the top for every transaction. And GoGov does not do that, which means the majority, if not all of the monies that are taken in to be able to provide mobile payment as well as web payment are included and do not come at an additional cost to the city or the taxpayers. So for sheer integration, and I know it's going to work with what we have, the only last piece would be, Michael, and I mentioned this to you, sitting down with the web team to make sure what's being developed, the assets can be easily ported in. That is the key focus. It's definitely more, I'm not looking at the app for a internal management feature, like we were saying, right? Like, unfortunately, code enforcement, DPW are not at a point yet where they're going to be able to take all of the inbound that every citizen wants to flag and create management tickets and use it. That's like maybe a year 5, year 10 use factor. But for the objective of making sure that you can update once and publish everywhere via the website, that includes everything that GoGov can do. It also includes the payment tie together. It allows for one sourced identity per resident so that you have a unified approach, no matter if you're accessing it via your desktop or your mobile device.
And are any of those features that you just listed not available to SeeClickFix?
SeeClickFix does not have the payment integration capabilities with some of the other software entities that we're working with. So, for example, they told me that they would need to have like a pass-through capability to work with our parking fee app. If we were to go to
when you say pass through, do you mean like like an
Payment
iframe?
I'm trying to use non-technical terms for folks. So payment connector wallet. Do you want me to? I can dial that part up if you want. But
This is the tech committee. You can nerd out here. This is
yeah,
the
we would basically need wallet capability and integrations across a variety of external players, and there are extra steps that residents would have to take to connect payment systems into it. So there's no Apple Pay connection, right? Like for me, if I keep getting my amazing $10 parking tickets for doing city business in front of City Hall, thank you, Tom, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I would much rather have it just connected through GoGov to my Apple Pay so I can go through, pay it, and be done. That is how easy GoGov makes it from the external point, right? And again, that's where C-Click Fix, if we were doing this for let's make sure that the management capability is in there internally, they would absolutely have my vote. But everything from a citizen perspective is what GoGov does in far better ways than what I see C-Click Fix doing to start. It's about that end user experience.
So what is the payment experience like? I mean, you're saying that you're saying that for C-Click Fix, residents would have to register their own payment information with their own proprietary.
There's that. There's also they do not integrate with the payment systems that some of our current payment systems are using. So for example, Heather's ridiculous, and I mean that respectfully, but like the level of difficulty that it's going to be to do the cloud migration, to turn on the payment capabilities. We asked, who do you work with? They do not work with C-Click Fix. They do work with GoGov already, and the integration is seamless. So it is something as easy, Theo, as we would be able to now provide widgets to be able to log in and pay on the city website or the redesigned city website, but more importantly, through the app. And because it's a one identity solution as well, what they're able to do easier on the back end without adding additional connectors, which is what C-Click Fix would have to do, is you create one ID, and on the back end, GoGov is uniting your user profile, if you will, so that when you pay your ticket or your water sewage bill quarterly or your taxes, you're going to have that all united through the databases on the back end, without the need to say, okay, actually, we need to bring in this connector tool to connect to the parking one. We need to bring in this connector tool to connect to the tax one. Everything is in one managed package, which in my experience in watching things for the past year with City Hall, we need to have fewer integrators, like one throat to choke, basically, right? Like look at phones and internet and everything else. So that's where, in my mind, it's like, they can handle the lift. And again, it goes back to that, think of the update capability, right? Author once, publish everywhere.
No, I think I'm fully on board with that. And I mean, that was a far better presentation of information, I feel like than at least what I got initially from their presentation. I think that one author published one that's like exactly, if we have any like sort of stamp out like the multiple authenticators and stuff like that, I'm fully on board with that. I did not even realize that C-Click did not have that on the back end. So I think like, I mean,
that's the thing, like the C-Click Fix is, when I really boil it down, right? C-Click Fix, if we were saying, if our goal one was, hey, we need a way for citizens to report things in town that help to more effectively manage us and the department so that we're addressing things that are top of mind, right? Like he's not here this evening, but like Bill Houston, right, is talking about the intersection of 3rd and Warren or 3rd and State constantly, right? If 20 people were sending that in, the C-Click Fix automatically moves that up to the top of the priority line, right? So what they're trying to show is that crowdsourced information can help you better manage and meet the expectations of your constituency. Yes, that is important, and we should get there eventually, but baby steps, right? Like the first thing that we need to do is get a website that's functional, followed by let's put the information in the palm of people's hands with an app. And the leap that we're kind of making in this first step too is let's get the payment system in here too. The other benefit with the GoGov is that they currently work with, Tom, what's the name of the kiosk again? It's not Mobile Pass. What's the new one called again? Down by the train.
We pay that bill every month, and I'm just.
It's not Pass. Is it Passport?
Yeah.
Yeah, Passport. So they work with Passport, And I already have a call into Passport as well to talk about what extending the contract would look like. And, you know, this is just shooting from the hip because I need to see what the parking study comes back with. But if you thought about almost like zigzagging Warren Street, right, where say it's the middle of every other block is where the parking kiosk would be for tickets, right? How do we get those out there? And then how do we have the one system that can unite it? GoGov integrates with pretty much 23 out of the 27 different providers of those that are on the market. The other thing is that from a management perspective, and I think SeeClick Fix does this, but I don't know, I couldn't figure out how from them. But we also need to be thinking about ahead with payments and the parking capabilities if we go to kiosks, how we make sure we're not burdening parking enforcement and, more importantly, the clerk's office with, hey, the power's out, the battery's down, the receipts need to be changed, right? Like all of that can be with these kiosks automated and delivered on the back end so that it's set up where DPW, police department, city clerk, mayoral aide are all alerted like, hey, it's the 23rd of the month and kiosk meters number 7, 5, and 12 need to have these things updated for them. So that's all part of that payments and parking integrated package too from GoGov. That means we're not going to have people pissed that, well, that meter, and you know who I'm talking about, that meter hasn't been working for 6 weeks kind of a thing. No, it's going to automate and let us know ahead of time what needs to happen. So
No, I thank you for that. I mean, for me, I'm like, I am not gonna die on any hill tonight. But I think just for me, I was like just less impressed with the interface with GoGo and SeeClick Fix, just like, you know, the backend experience seems a lot more like intuitive, but you know, I think if it is integrating, like, you know, then I think we should go for the shiny wrapper. For me, I think what's so important, I do want to raise this, and I think that's something that did stand out for me, and I'm just going back to my notes like 4 months ago at this point, but something that did stand out was the complaint form. It seemed, you know, or like 3-in-1 complaint form. I think there's something that I'll be talking about in the coming months about, you know, an issue that I'd like to do, like reconsidering how complaints are handled in the police department. And the mechanisms for preserving the identity of complainants and the ways of routing those to appropriate parties seem to be more streamlined with SeeClick Fix. I know that's a very particular use case.
nope, and GoGov can do that as well. So that is all on the internal side when something comes in. It is just that we would need to assign the notifiers, right? So, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, we're moving from .org to .gov eventually?
Yeah, so we have that in the pipeline. It's gonna take a while, but we have the .gov URL secure.
Yeah.
So Theo, that's like when we have that migration, that's exactly the routing point for that information too, right? When they're going to be issued new email addresses, we'll also make sure that they're issued the certain alerts, right? And determining, to your point, who gets them. Do you want, if we're going to use the police department, do you want them going to the patrol team, or do you want them going to, say, sergeants and above, depending on the sensitivity of the inquiry or the inbound? So.
Okay, yeah, great. No, thanks for that. That was a very,
I guess
compelling argument.
Just for transparency's sake, was there a significant difference in price to the taxpayers between the two?
No, not really. And that's the best part. They're both, and this all goes back to the original thing that I want to say February I presented, right? Just us taking away, having all of these documents printed, just the council alone from having documents printed, it's about 85. I don't remember the number in the presentation specifically. It was like 8,500 or 8,900, but it is the equivalent of paying for this app for 1 year. And so, you know, if we look at it over 3 years, I think it was like over 3 years, we can save about $20,000. That's an app, maybe, and some parking kiosks, right? So it's helping all of this to work a little bit smarter for us, right? I mean, the financial audit that I wasn't able to do is, what does that do in terms of, increasing park enforcement's ability to have the time to actually focus on giving tickets out for folks that aren't metered versus the battery changing and the hauling of the quarters and all of that stuff, right? Like there's a people factor that goes all into it too. Bye, Theo.
Compelling argument, if you, it seems like you've done your due diligence and I
Bowing out.
You broke his spirit, you made him leave.
Did I break him? He was just like, I'm out, bye.
no, I was just like, but it has a cool wrapper on it. No, I think that all sounds great, and I hear you, and I think like all those are really compelling reasons to go GoGov, and I agree that we just need to choose and go forward with one. So I'm team GoGov.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right.
So-
Thank you. All right.
Tom, if we want to look at and entertain the formal proposal for it now, how do we do this?
It involves signing a contract, right?
It'll involve the contract, which has to go through the mayor's office.
Oh, no, first let Crystal look through the contract.
Perfect. I'll pull you into all this then.
Crystal review the contract. We vote on it. It goes to the mayor's office.
All right.
I'm sorry. We vote on on asking the mayor to sign it. And then he'll sign it.
The one step I'd like to do, Crystal, before I bring you into the fold, is Michael, now that we've had this level of direction set, can you get me an audience with the web team? Because I want to make sure that the web team and GoGov sync first, just to make sure that all the assets that are currently in development do indeed plug into this, because if there would need to be anything else, and it's the basic template that I believe it's Ithaca is using in GoGov as well. As long as there's nothing else that would need to be developed and it's an easy port from web to the mobile platform, I want to make sure all the costs are understood before I bring Crystal into that point.
Sure, I'll send an email to the team tomorrow with you on it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Cool. I think that's great. Also, do you have a contract for them, Ryan?
No, I haven't asked for contracts yet. I just had the rough quotes that I provided a couple of months back from both. They've been eagerly following up to ask about next steps, so I'll let them know, where we're at. But again, the step one is conferring with the web team, and then as long as I'm confident that things will work with the web team, then I'll have Crystal negotiate shrewdly for us. Thank you, Crystal.
Alrighty, the last item that I had was the treasurer's office update. I know you did some work on that, Ryan. I just wanted to hear about it.
Yeah. So the Heather actually brought it up during the last informal meeting. So we have gone through everything that it's going to take to, like, basically what we're getting together are 3 proposals. The first proposal is the standard, what does it take for us to just upgrade the existing software that we use, which we're all in agreement we have to do. Like, it is not backed up on anything other than a desktop that sits within the clerk's office. So that's step one. The second aspect was asking for a few additional features that can be included in this, which is the payments capability. The third is looking at, and I'm blanking, I forget right now, but it was another element that would provide insight. I think it was the was it zoning or tax? I think it was a piece of software that could also be used for the assessor's office, so that you as a resident, when you logged in, like I was saying, like you've got your one ID, you will really have your holistic understanding of like your property value, your tax, your school tax. There's no more go search on the real property website and pray that you're a wonderful indexer. It is literally in the palm of your hand to totally understand what you're.
I'm assuming what you're talking about is right now we have a book out in the lobby.
Yeah.
Where you have to look up things. This would integrate it into.
It integrates the book.
Cool.
It also pulls updates, Tom, real time from the county, which is the manual process that right now happens for Cheryl. So this basically automates everything where within a week's time, if I were to make a change within my real property, it has to be legally updated from the county to the state. all of this would update simultaneously then into the palm of residents' hands. So it really is efficient.
That's great. That's really, really great.
But I believe the costs will be, the base cost just for the cloud migration is about $60K. I don't believe that the payment modules are much more expensive. And we've already discussed with those vendors, there for them as well, like OGov, there is no surcharge for being able to do the mobile payments, and they integrate with most, if not all, major financial institutions, including the ones that the city uses, which is good because then you're not paying what's known as an access fee into the financial institution. And second of all, you know, say I wanted to pay on credit card, I'm not going to be charged the surcharge for that as well, and neither will the city, right? And just for background, for those that don't know, typically there's like a 4% markup from the credit card companies.
It's high.
That won't get charged to the city for enabling that element to residents, and vice versa. We're not saying your bill is $100. Kidding. Your bill is $104 because you're going to be using the credit card. So
That's great.
Great.
Is there anything, what's the next steps on that?
we are waiting for, bless the lady that Heather and I have been working with. We actually had a lot of laughs about this, but she sent a proposal that was not what we asked for. We called her back and explained to her that we need this sort of three-tiered approach. So we are waiting on that. And there are 2 more demos that we have asked for beforehand. So we haven't seen the demo of the utility payment yet, or the reconciliation software. That was the 3rd one. So Tom and team, the reconciliation software right now, we have to manually process that, and it typically happens monthly. This is the software that across the entirety of the city can take in all of the numbers and reconcile nightly, so that the mayor's office is able to say, or the council can say, you know what, it's 7/27 on August 24th. I want to know exactly what's in the coffers. We have real-time access to understanding the city's finances.
And you know, I constantly ask Heather those questions.
But this is it.
It'd be great, actually.
It is laborious in general for her. This would be, I don't think she thought that we would go for something like this technology wise for the lift, but like it will help everybody out. It will take a lot of work off of her plate, especially at a time when they are understaffed.
Well, they did hire, and this is
Emily,
perfect
yes.
timing. So this is perfect time for Emily, who could,
Yep.
you know, be all fresh, not having to teach somebody who's been there for a long time.
Yep. Ron?
Great.
Yes,
That's awesome.
thanks. I wanted to ask what version or model of the OWL is being used in City Hall?
Oh, I don't know what version of the software, but Michael, we just updated that, right?
The version of what?
The OWL and the OWL software.
Oh, hold on.
There,
Well,
I was looking that up
It's last year's model.
of the hardware, but the software is the most recent from like 2 weeks ago, right? 3 weeks ago.
Actually, I don't think I've updated it recently.
Okay, well, I know that we had an issue, maybe it was a month or so ago, and it was the software that we had to update. That's why it wasn't like connecting with the laptops.
Okay, well, because sometimes the voices from City Hall, I don't know if it's because of the acoustics or because of how many microphones or whatever the OWL has, but sometimes they're rather muffled and indistinct.
It's the construct of the room, Ron. It's the downside of it. If like Art speak, because you and Ronnie are very close. Can you say something?
Yeah, I'm guessing, Ron, you had a hard time hearing Theo? Or Hoffman?
When he was leaving, I did, but I think maybe today, basically things have been better because you're all sort of sitting on the same level.
That's it. So I usually sit sort of the back corner of one area of the room.
Mhm.
And it's challenging if you sit on the back 2 rows, but some of that hopefully will be addressed as well when the renovation of the chambers is complete. So
Yes, that's important thing to bring up. Okay, thanks.
yeah, think of the OWL as temporary, we hope.
Okay.
There is a software update for the owl that I will do once this meeting is over.
Thank you, because I tried it on my, it wouldn't pair with my MacBook last time.
All right, do we have anything else to talk about? Any new business?
I may bring this team into some of the stuff I was working on with the CAC. So, Tom Nexamp has come back to me. Nexamp is who, if you remember, I had them do the solar measurements over the bus garage and then the field behind the reservoir. I know that we need to find another company that wants to bid for it, or at least give us an estimate. Nobody has come back to me yet, but
Who have you asked Sun Solar? Sun Common?
or sorry, it's Suncommon who did the first one. It's Nexamp. Back to me. So I need help in finding like another company that is willing to come and give us a bid on it. The reason is the Biden's congressional act that just got passed has a ton of money in it for projects like this. So like us before December to try to get, and I know this is, it literally is the merging though of tech and environment. So I'm going to be co-opting both meetings, but we need to get moving on it because I'd like us to try to get something submitted no later than November. A fair shot at some cash.
What is this project you're trying to install solar?
So, so from the CAC, there had been like a movement where many of those members were recommending that we try to put solar on top of all of the city buildings. But the challenge is, especially look at City Hall, like actually look at the roof in the room that you're in and tell me that there's not problems with said roof, right? Now, granted, we're getting that fixed, but it doesn't make sense for us to spend the infrastructure of something that we lease for 20 years on any of the municipal buildings when there's nothing to say that we may not change that structure in 5 years or 10 years, right? Then those buildings are saddled with that tech. So instead, if you start looking at some of the more permanent and larger structures where you can put broader solar arrays in place, like the old bus garage, which is now the DPW garage down on Dock Street, or if you go behind the reservoir next to the cemetery, there is a whole open field, no trees, faces south. I had Suncommon come in and provide the estimate, just solarizing the bus garage area down by the sewage treatment plant, and that area takes all of water and sewer offline with green energy based on the past energy bills themselves, right? So I'm looking at it as how do we compartmentalize different areas of the city, of city services to try to take advantage of green energy that takes us off the grid. So if that did water and sewer, one of the areas that we didn't look at yet are the police station, right? Is there enough room on the top of that building to put an array that would suffice their energy needs?
There was also a question of its ability to sustain an array.
Oh, that building? Yeah, I don't know because that is a light, that what do they call it? Light end construction or something like that because metal. But it's looking at those elements of where does it make sense?
Definitely.
City services. So I need help.
Have we looked at, I mean, if this is something we're going to continuously talk about, I think one of the first areas of opportunity is parking lots. Parking lots are already like heat sinks, just as like an environmental thing where it just soaks up heat. We can dissipate some of that heat into solar panels. It would be kind of a win-win. We are
looking at
The
that.
parking study is actually one of the things that, God, I'm blanking on his name now too.
John,
Thank you, was bringing up was, say we were to do a garage or say we were to improve or go double decker, right, on some of the existing parking lots, i.e. the one behind City Hall, what happens to that top area? Is it parking or until we have the need for it more like, is it because it'll be higher than the buildings and thereby
it can be
open?
both.
Yeah, could it be solar
can be
array,
both.
right? So
There are, the arrays that you can put on an existing parking lot.
correct.
right.
I mean, it's just a question of what the government's really gonna, I mean, it'd be really nice to get this funded through the recent.
Through the bill, exactly. So that's why I want to try to, if I can, push the tech committee to help me out with the CAC stuff as well. So if anybody can think of a second company that would be willing to sort of
And
match
I'll
the
look into
presentation from Sun Company or from Suncommon, I'd appreciate it because I believe submissions need to be made. We would basically need to get some form of request in and approve that we want to move in that direction. And then we need to bring in some of the congressional folks as well that can help to get it in front of the right people in Washington, because I want to make sure that we can take advantage of this.
We
And
were
quick,
crucial in Pat Ryan's win, so.
I saw that. Yeah, but
Yeah,
dear Pat, you love the sun. We do too.
Ulster and Columbia brought it home for him.
So, but that's all I got in terms of like new-ish business.
Great. Did you have a timeline for the Heather thing? The Heather-
We want to get everything set so that migration can start in October. So the presentation,
That's great.
we're doing the demo on the utility stuff this Friday, I think at 4 o'clock. And I have to look at my calendar, and then we should be able to get the proposal by just after Labor Day. And then I want to get that in front of the council for September so we can action it. And then we would start the migration in October with the goal of January 1 being completely fresh, migrated, and have the municipal payment capabilities in place. So that, Michael, I believe also, if I lined it up correctly, dovetails nicely with what the mayor's office is trying to do on the website.
Cool.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right, that's all I got.
Do we need motions?
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Third.
all in favor?
Aye.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Crystal, thanks for your work on those things. Oop,
Thank you, Crystal. Yeah.
bye, everybody.